The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. You know, today, Catherine Raven is my guest. She's a former National Park Ranger at Glacier, Mount Rainier, North Cascades, Voyageurs, and Yellowstone National Parks. She earned a PhD in biology from Montana State University. She holds a degree in zoology and botany from the University of Montana and is a member of Mensa. Now that means, when I hear that word Mensa, Catherine, it means you're pretty smart. So I just want to read something to you. You know, a lot of people praise you. And one of the things that they have said is Fox and I, which is your book, will make you feel deeply about our relationship with animals and nature. After you read this book, you will experience animals in a new and marvelous way. And that was written by Temple Grayden, New York Times bestseller author of Animals in Translation. And it is such a pleasure to have you on the show because you have so much to talk to about, for us to talk to you about. And believe it or not, I've read your book and it is absolutely wonderful. So welcome to my show, Catherine Raven.
Thank you so much. And you are all so very welcome to my time. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, let me ask you something, Catherine. What inspired you to write this book? Because needless to say, you're very much involved with animal rights and animal everything. And Fox and I is an uncommon friendship. So what is it about this particular book that you decided to write it?
The decision was made based on what I owed the fox. At some point, after we had been friends for a couple of years, there was an actual point when I made up my mind to write the book. Many important decisions in life aren't made that way. They're made gradually. As you read from Fox and I, my decision to live where I live, to not move to the city, to stay out in the wilderness, to accept the fact that foxes had personalities, those were decisions that took a long time after going back and forth. But writing the book, that was almost instantaneous. I realized that I owed this to Fox, and it happened because one night in the moonlight, he brought his 4 little foxes down for me to take care of. And he sat on the sidelines pretending to be sleeping as he would, winking on and off, kind of keeping an eye on me, but not really, and letting me babysit his 4 kits. And that was his job. It's dangerous at night. Mountain lions don't often come all the way down to my property, but they do. There's been grizzly bears a stone's throw from here, but always there's weasels in the draw where they were playing around. There's skunks and feral cats and badgers too. So here's these little tiny foxes playing all around me, jumping all around my feet in the moonlight. And he trusted me so much. And I realized when I came in from that evening being with Fox, the amount of trust and the amount that he showed and the amount of joy that I experienced from him, I put those things together and I was overwhelmed with this feeling and I couldn't sleep. And I realized that is joy that I'm feeling, that I've been getting from him. And he trusts me that much. And I don't have any better definition of love for an individual. We use the word love casually to say things like, I love that dinner I had last night and I love my new sneakers. But when we're talking about how we feel towards an individual, it's very difficult to know what we mean by love. But I felt that this joy plus trust together was really love. And I was working on a textbook. I just swooshed it off my desk like that. Boom, there's no way I'm going to work on a textbook right now. I have to write Fox's story because he's just that important of an individual. I realized then how unusual that relationship was and how important and rare and special and magical, really, it is to have an animal like a wild animal. I wasn't feeding him. He wasn't a pet in any way at all. He wasn't dependent on me. He was as independent from me as you are, Susan. And yet he chose to place this much trust in me, as much trust as you would expect that your spouse would place in you. And then he gives me more joy than you could possibly expect. You could not expect to get any more joy from any individual than from what I got from him.
There's nothing more precious than having I'm going to call him a companion that does so much for you and makes you so happy. But, the stories in this book reflect the author's recollection of events, your events, and some names, locations, and identifying characteristics have been changed to protect the privacy of those depicted. Some of the dialogue has been recreated from memory. So tell me a little bit more about the fox and the animals that surround your house in the wilderness. And do you have the feeling that they give you so much to be thankful for in a way?
Definitely to be thankful for. I feel thankful all day long. There was a beautiful sunrise this morning. There was a beautiful sunset last night. But I would tell you that any one of the 365 days of the year that you would call me, because I always feel that way. I'm always looking for who's outside and how they're doing. Maybe it's 2 flickers this morning and some deer, elk last night. Sometimes it's the grasses, and I'm not paying too much attention to the animals, but I always feel as though I have a community of other companions out here. And they're not companionable as fox was. They're not that close to me, but they're still part of my community so that I don't feel alone. And I feel like there's a fellowship of folks that we care about each other and we comfort each other, and we're not alone. We're all in this when the wind's blowing 20 miles an hour or 30 or 40, and it's very icy out, or maybe it's way below zero. We're all in it together. We're not alone. We're a community. And it's a very interesting way to look at nature, because before I spent so much time with fox, based on the literature that I was reading and what I was familiar with, it seemed like the way to look at nature was to revere it as though it was something saintly or holy or spiritual. And so we felt as though we put it on a pedestal, and it was so much better than us, because certainly we're not holy and saintly, but nature is. And yes. The other way of looking at nature is that it's to be conquered. And you might think of that as the typical macho kind of nature writing, and it's not always written by men, but the folks who are out there conquering the world, making their conquests of the mountaintops and the brutal runs of the whitewater rafting and whatever else they can do to show that they are mastering nature. So those are the 2 ways that people look at it. Either nature is something that you need to conquer, or nature is something that you need to worship. And I found a better way for me, which I won't change now. I found that I'm doing neither of those things with nature. I'm just fitting myself right in, just pushing in. I am part of this community. It's my birthright. I don't have to worship nature because I am part of nature. It's every living thing and every non-living thing that's not man-made that's in my community here. So all of the non-made elements of my community are nature. And I fit right in, and I don't have to fight it, as sometimes nature wins. Yes, I play games with clouds. You probably read about that in the book. Not often, but sometimes, yes, I do play games with clouds, and sometimes they win, and sometimes I win, just like with the games I played with the fox.
Well, something, I'm going to call you Kathy in a way.
Yes, sure.
If that's okay with you.
It is, absolutely.
Kathy, let me ask you something. You are very special. You know that. I mean, you can't deny it, because the way that you write this book makes you feel so pleased, so happy. There's a side of it that makes you happy. Why did you write this book? And I'm going to ask you to really tell about you. I don't want, the book to be told about because you just mentioned it, but I would like to know a little bit more about you, Kathy.
I think that I am a very happy person. I think that I learned some very important things through life, through my relationship with Fox. I think that there's magpies in the story, and I suppose I was a magpie for a long time and felt that I wasn't going to find my place in the human community. I think I was waiting for the wrong people. I was thinking that you're supposed to be born into some family that just loves you and takes care of you and pushes you forward and is empathetic towards you. And not everybody has a family. It's not everything in nature has a family. In fact, it's very unusual. It's wonderful if you do, and you should, seek that, obviously, a birth family, but you don't have a choice. And I don't think that you should ever spend a minute of your time thinking about the things that you have no choice about. For example, where you were born. You have no choice. Who you were born to, you have no choice. You can ask me how much I weigh, and I'd be happy to tell you, but I'm not going to tell you how tall I am. I don't want to be judged on something I have no choice about, my height or where I was born or what year I was born or any of that. What people do have a choice in is to go forward, to find your own natural, your nature, who you really are. And you have to throw away the things that you didn't choose, that aren't part of who you are deep down intrinsically. And you have to maybe throw away culture, because human nature is more important than culture.
Kathy,
and my own nature is to be very happy, and I'm very settled in a community where most of the things around me are not human. It's true. I have a lot of human friends and fellows since the book has come out, and since the Fox. In the last few years, I've certainly made a tremendous number of friends and relationships that have been really wonderful. But of course, I still do live alone in a relatively isolated place.
Yeah.
And yes.
Something that is interesting too is that you have written essays that have appeared in some of the most wonderful and very educational journals, such as the American Scientist, the Journal of American Mensa, and the Montana Magazine. What are the articles that you've written to them? Because if it's anything like your book, they must be amazing. So tell our audience a little bit about what you've written to these magazines or to these different and to these different journals. It's
funny that they all have different themes, and yet, uncannily enough, they all seem to have an animal focus. One, stars, bald eagles; another, stars, skunks; another, stars, mountain goats, and so it's and another, plants, of the four that I'm thinking of offhand here. One about fire too. So they are mostly about nature, but they are about an odd way that I have of seeing nature that I just simply can't help, and it comes very instinctively to me, which is to see myself as an equal. So I'm not as looking at animals and plants as though I were a scientist studying them all the time. I'm more looking at them as though we're equal.
What exactly is
it's a very odd feeling. It's a different kind of an empathy. And one way that I can explain it to you, it's something that I absolutely can't help. And I did meet one other student recently when I was doing a talk who felt the same way. And I've only met one other person in all my talks that has the same issue. When I'm driving down the road here, we often have animals that have been hit by cars, especially during our very long hunting season, because the animals are filled with hormones, and there's bullets flying all over, and they're running out in front of cars. And many of these animals haven't evolved to deal with vehicles that drive as fast as ours do. So porcupines and skunks, they haven't evolved to deal with with this. And so we do see them on the side of the road a lot, and raccoons and such. So the problem for me is that when the first thing that happens when I see an animal on the side of the road, I feel that pain and that horror that that animal had when it was being hit by the car. I'm looking at whether it was in the center of the road, whether it's on the side, whether its legs are up. And then I cannot get out of my mind that it's not a human. I just absolutely, to me, dead animals on the side of the road are not any different to me than if there was a dead human on the side of the road. And when it's safe and there's no one around me, and we don't have a lot of places to pull over on, narrow 2-lane roads here, but when I can pull over, and I always have a shovel in my car, I pull over and I pull the animals someplace where they're not exposed, because I feel like it's so disrespectful. And even if I only have to pull them a little way to where they're around brush or something. And then, of course, on the rare occasion when I happen to get there at the wrong time and the animal's still alive and suffering, then, of course, I have a handgun in the car. So I do take care of animals that way. But that's what I mean about my unusual empathy towards animals, that it's very difficult for me to separate myself as a human being as clearly as some other people do, and just look at animals as though they're so different from us.
Kathy, you've written a lot about...
I hope you don't think I'm too weird now.
Well, no, you certainly don't sound weird. Maybe a little bit, but not so much. But really, truly, one of the things that I would like you to do is do you have your book in front of you?
Let's see. I can get my book in front of me. Do you want me to read something?
I sure do.
Okay. Let's see what I have to read right here. In fact, print sections. No, this is 3 minutes. Okay.
You got it.
Okay. I was a park ranger before I earned my doctorate in biology. In fact, I was pressing a Stetson on my head and cinching up that iconic pinecone embossed belt before I finished my bachelor's degree. I'd studied botany and zoology in college. In Washington's Mount Rainier National Park, I patrolled the backcountry. My trail circuit included a region known as 3 Lakes, where I stayed in a tiny cabin that smelled like wood and wax. A few feet shorter than my blue-roofed cottage, the 3 Lakes patrol cabin and its outhouse perched on a knoll above First Lake, the largest of the 3 lakes. Giant, shaggy-barked evergreens surrounded and almost completely shaded the lake. I never called it First Lake. I treated all 3 lakes as a single body of water, temporarily separated by a transient meadow, and called it all 3 lakes, no matter which shore it stood on. Not many hikers trudged the 6 miles uphill to 3 Lakes from the nearest road. Even fewer came by way of the Pacific Crest Trail, a long journey that required camping overnight. Every morning, I rose from a sleeping deck that ran flush with the cabin's window and scratched myself into a uniform, one badge on the shirt and another on the jacket. Wearing a .357 in a shoulder holster, I hiked down to the lake with coffee in one hand and a government-issued logbook in the other. Across my green cloth logbook in fat black cursive, I had written a quote from Ishmael, the narrator of Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Meditation and water are wedded forever. For Ishmael, an impecunious sailor hustling jobs in Manhattan in the 1800s, meditation meant exactly what it meant to me at the 3 Lakes cabin in the 20th century, pondering. If it had any other meaning, scholastic, formal, or religious, I wasn't any more aware of it than Ishmael would have been. Overall, our lot and luck didn't differ by much. We'd both found ways to keep wild animals and wild water nearby. Melville could have dropped Ishmael along the Shriner Peak Trail and let him join me on the 8-mile hike up the exposed ridge to the fire lookout. After surveying wildlife and hammering PVC pipes into snowbanks, we would haul jerry cans filled with meltwater back to the fire tower. In the evening, we would stand on the tower's railed balcony to admire our priceless view of Mount Rainier, And never mind the 1,000 miles or the 150 years that separated us, the same thought would cross our minds. An 8-mile hike, no better view in the Northwest, asked less of a person. After a night at the lookout, we would follow Laughing Water Creek through old-growth forest, using Leatherman tools and pruning paint to repair graffiti that scalawags had carved into the thin gray bark of silver firs. Laughing Water Creek traces the park's boundary around the rim of the Three Lakes Basin, so we would have to check on boundary signs. Pausing periodically at the white metal signs with green embossed letters, one of us would slip the reverse end of a claw hammer under a double-headed nail, pulling just enough to prevent the sign from eating into the bark of a boundary tree. We wouldn't mind the workload. We were outdoors, away from civilization, free from anxiety. An impecunious sailor in Manhattan in 1800 expressed anxiety by deliberately stepping into the streets and methodically knocking people's hats off. To a backcountry ranger in the 20th century, anxiety meant turning into mercury, a metal that evaporates in ambient temperatures, becoming invisible, odorless, completely unassuming. I will end it there, if that's okay.
You know, one of the things that I want to tell you, Kathy, is that when I listen to you tell this little story, it absolutely mesmerizes me, which leads me to asking you, are you a religious person?
Well, I am not a person that has much time for people who tell me they're atheists. I will tell you that. So I don't believe that human beings are the most important things in this world. There are things we don't understand. And so that thing we don't understand, God, I absolutely accept the existence of God. And I do not believe we need to understand God. Most people don't even understand gravity, for goodness sake. And yet they want to tell me that they don't believe in God because they don't understand it. We're not supposed to believe in God. Understand God. If we understood God, then it's not God, is it? So that's pretty much the definition of God, is what we don't understand. But yes, I absolutely do. And I think it's wonderful when people have a particular religion. I know that, the other day I was hiking with somebody in Yellowstone, and he mentioned that he was religious at one time, but God didn't do anything for him. And I won't hike with him anymore now, because the point is, we're supposed to do for God. God's not supposed to do for us, right? We're supposed to keep being grateful all the time, aren't we? And that's how I feel. I'm just constantly grateful for every little thing. And yes, that's a good question. I didn't realize that it showed up in the book, but apparently it does.
Yeah. Kathy, one of the things that when you talk about God, I also heard you say something about spirituality. And spirituality is a wonderful thing. Curiosity leads me to asking you, do you meditate when you're in that environment? It actually causes you, as I listen to you, to actually feel unstressed. So does it take away the stress that you had before you lived in this particular area?
Oh, certainly. Although I've spent decades now living in beautiful places in the national parks and in wilderness, and I can't imagine living in a place where you can't see the sunset and the sunrise, and there's just buildings all around you, and you're feeling hemmed in. It's really spectacular. There's a lot of windows in this teeny weeny little cottage that I live in. And when I'm not inside, I'm outside. So I'm either inside with windows all around. It seems like you're outside. Yeah. This morning, seeing the sun coming up, the pink sky behind the mountains, I just stopped what I was getting ready to do, which was grade papers. And I just watched and watched and watched and just didn't move. And I just stared. I do that a lot. And when I was finished, I thought to myself, I bet there's a lot of people who look at a scene like this for a split second, wherever they are in the world, and think, shucks, I've got to get back to, I've got to make my breakfast. I've got to comb my hair. I've got to jump in the shower. I've got an appointment to get my nails done. I've got to go grade papers. I've got to. And so I would spend time watching nature, but I have other more important things to do. And really, those other things aren't more important than spending time. Every time I see rainbows here, I stop. And the funny thing, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of rainbows. This is rainbow country. And the funny thing is, I will see cars doing that all the time, all over with local license plates. It's something that people just do. They see a rainbow and they just stop. It doesn't matter if you're going to be late for your appointment or late for the doctors or late for whatever. So meditation, if that's, is a part of life when you live in a place like this. And also, I think that people who live here, who choose to live here, who stay here, are the kind of people that take advantage. Well, because of course we have no money or income or anything else, and it's brutally cold. So people stay here because they're the kind of people who like to take advantage of the scenery. But I believe you can do it wherever you live. I was just in Miami, and I thought I saw some beautiful scenes, even from the center of town. From high up in a hotel, you can look down and see those beautiful palm trees waving and waving and waving. And it's mesmerizing, as are all the flowers that grow there, and the ocean.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that, because I want to tell you, my mother had dementia, but it didn't matter. She used to say to me all the time, she said, look up at the sky. Look how beautiful the sky is. Look how beautiful. And she would repeat herself over and over, and it gave her so much pleasure. And I think about that now for me. When I see this beautiful sky, I always say to my husband, oh my God, look at it. And aren't we lucky where we live? So you are very lucky in a way. You made a choice, and the choice that you made put you in an atmosphere that is so beautiful that you are de-stressing. And when somebody lives in some place like that, they can only wish that others could share their story and their place. So, Kathy, did you ever bring some of your family to the place, and did they feel the same way as you?
No, I don't think they've been in the state that I live.
Oh.
But my family that I've made, my fellowship is, if you look at the acknowledgement section in my book, I think all those people in the acknowledgements have been to my place, to my cabin. I've hiked with them. I've spent week-long vacations with them in the wilderness. I've spent my holidays with those people. So that's what's important. The people that you've spent that kind of time with, the people that you spend your holidays with, the people that you spend time with, that you go out and relax with and talk to, the people that listen to you and you listen to them, the people that are there for you. I think that I've now surrounded myself with so many people that feel the same way that I do, that really are happy people, that are empathetic people. Of course, I teach students, and when you teach students, there are certain types of personalities that you have to have, but not all of the people that I associate with teach. But if you teach or if you write, writing is another kind of a profession where you absolutely cannot be a bitter person or a jealous person. You can only write from a good place towards a good place. Maybe politicians who are writing speeches want to put vindictive things in their speeches, but when you're doing creative nonfiction, when you're writing memoir, when you're writing novels, it comes from a good place. You have to have this very deep-seated emotional honesty and empathy and kindness, or you will not succeed as either a university professor or a writer, really.
That's right. Now, what's in store for you next? You must be writing another book, I would imagine.
Yes, I am. I'm working on a novel now, and working on Fox also is still a large part of what I'm doing, because you can't just put a book into the world. Like my students, I don't just set them out into the world and expect them to be on their own. And a book is the same. My students are my children, right? They go out into the world, but I tell them I'm always their teacher, no matter what, forever, once they leave my class. And my book is mine forever. And so I'm still doing interviews, written interviews that I have to respond to people's requests for photos and more information, and short essays about fox. So I'm still helping people understand the fox story, and helping, because I want very much for Fox to be read by so many people. That's his legacy. You know, the book was dedicated to Fox.
Correct.
And I know he wanted to matter. And I really feel like he succeeds when more and more people read about him. Then that's what he wanted in life. He wanted to leave a legacy. I don't know that I particularly wanted to leave a legacy, but he did. He wanted a legacy for sure. And so I'm helping him with his legacy. And I love my novel, by the way. So that it's just really enjoyable for me. When I have time to work on it, that's really what I like to do.
So if people want to get in touch with you and they want to get your book, Fox and I, how do they do that?
Any bookstore or Amazon will have Fox and I, but you can go to my website, which is catherineraven.com. That's one very easy way. If you go to catherineraven.com, you can see all the links to get my book at any bookstore in the country, or Amazon, or Barnes and Noble, any of those places you can choose. And also there's a link there to email me if you'd like to do that. Well, and my Twitter's there too.
There you go. Well, you've been absolutely amazing. I have to tell you that, because I can't keep it inside me. Listening to you, living in that environment that is so beautiful, and having the kind of spirituality and religiousness that you really have, you're really profound. So thank you so very much, Catherine Raven, for being on the Susan Brender Show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm dying to meet you when I come to Miami, and I hope that will be next fall, if not sooner. But let's get in touch when I'm there in the fall.
I would love it. It will be great. And we don't live that far. We live in Delray Beach. So if I can meet you, it'll be great. Are you going to the book fair next year?
That's what I'm hoping. And that's in November, right?
That's right.
Yes.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Catherine. Really, I'm not kidding. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. It's been wonderful. And thank you for reading Fox and telling people about Fox.